What's up, everybody? Welcome into yet another episode of the Baseline Jumper podcast. My name is Jason Goldstein. On the line with me right now is a man, while in quarantine, who was dressed like he's getting a 48-hour furlough in Las Vegas. The great Ben McDonald, ladies and gentlemen. Ben, do I have to come get you out of your hotel room and bring you back to practice?
I didn't know where you were going, but that was a nice little Dennis Rodman segue there. I enjoyed that. Didn't see that one coming. I just Carmen Electra is not hiding in my closet here, but you might have to come get me, my friend. We have to do this pod live, but I'm doing well, my friend. How are you, my dear friend?
I'm doing well, man. Just grinding. Happy to be talking to you. Taking a little break from working pretty much constantly, which is a good way to stay occupied during this quarantine. But yeah, I've been good. For those of you who are listening, we hope you're all feeling healthy, you're all safe. And if you or anyone you know and love are battling COVID, we send our thoughts and prayers your way. Obviously, we're trying to stick together here as a world, and Ben and I trying to do our part to at least give you something to listen to as we just blab about hoops. But before we get into hoops, everyone, clap it up for Ben, who completed a marathon this past Saturday, a quarantine-a-thon. But that's something that Ben's been training for a while now. So congrats to you, buddy. We're all proud of you here at the Baseline Jumper. Tell us about it. I mean, did you get a medal?
Did not get a medal. Just did it for the love of the run. And I wore my Baseline Jumper shirt as I did it, no less. So
you are a jogging self-promoter. I love it. You killed two birds with one stone.
You got it, buddy. But it was good. It was very good. I'm happy to be done with running 26 miles. And now I look forward to running shorter increments going forward. And that's about all I have to say about marathon running. As Forrest Gump would say, and that's all I have to say about that. And that's not a very good Forrest Gump accent.
So Ben ran 26 miles this past weekend, and I'm going to try and run for 26 seconds before we do a podcast next. I think it's an achievable goal. It's supposed to be nice here in Jersey this weekend. But before we get into The Last Dance, parts 3 and 4 aired the other night, there's a little ray of sunshine that when I started putting these notes together was really excited about, but then it got pushed back. So it looks like they're trying to get NBA practice facilities open for player workouts. The target date was May 1st, but now the earliest that anyone can get in there is May 8th. Would be a huge step in the right direction and getting back to basketball in a safe and healthy manner. I think a lot of these guys that don't have, basketball courts in their houses, if they live in apartments, they haven't been able to shoot a basketball in 6 weeks, 7 weeks. So it's tough. So hopefully if the players are feeling healthy enough, they'll be able to get in there, work out individually, still social distance. And if there is a season this summer, then they'll be able to at least work their way back into game shape.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to have to happen relatively soon. The players need a few weeks to get ready. You take that into account. You take into account some playoffs. They probably have to finish the season no later than end of August. So they're going to have to start it by, probably June, July, you figure? Probably if it's not started by, like, July 1st, like if we get to July 4th and there's no NBA games, it's probably the end of the season. So that gives them 2 months. But that doesn't include the prep time, which I think Chris Paul came out and said he needed 4 weeks, something like that. So if you go based on that, there's like a month left. And that's pretty – it's going to be pretty tough. So we'll see what happens. Maybe they cut the playoffs a little short, but could be the end of the season. But thankfully, Jason, as we wade into some dark times in the NBA, we do have Michael Jordan and the Chicago Bulls of the 1990s to keep us company, which has become a favorite in my household, hopefully in yours as well. Flo likes it maybe as much as I do and has gotten as invested in the characters as any Bulls fan ever did. She's very disapproving of Jerry Krause, I have to tell you, Jason. She does not like Jerry Krause at all. And if that's not something we can all agree on, then I don't know what to say. I mean, can we all agree that Jerry Krause is the villain of this show?
Absolutely. And he's also the new villain of Baseline Jumper. So we could take Jalad and Pete and all these guys that have battled with us. And of course, Hill Boyce, my favorite person to battle with. They're all off the hook. The new villain of baseline jumper is Jerry Krause.
I love it. I love the names you threw out there. I love your memory is impeccable. Um, I'm stifling some laughter, but in all seriousness, Jerry Krause just comes off as just the worst kind of human. His dance maybe Flo's favorite part of the 2 episodes was in the airplane where Jerry Krause starts to dance and and Scottie Pippen immediately goes, "Sit down, Jerry, sit down." She lost it. She thought that was hilarious.
It was funny.
So I think if there's one sport we can all agree that we love, it's making fun of Jerry Krause, and poor Jerry Krause does get made fun of a lot by Jordan, among others. But among some of the other characters, obviously, Jason, we talked about Krause, and we'll come back to him in a minute. But I think the feature kind of the episodes that came out on Sunday were Dennis Rodman and his sort of let's call it unique story. I mean, what did you make of that?
So I thought it was cool how episode 1 they showed Michael Jordan's background, and they did Scottie coming from a small school in Arkansas in episode 2. So you knew the anticipation was there. Episode 3 was going to be focused on Dennis Rodman, and boy, did they deliver. Just showing him come up and, not playing basketball until late, having so many siblings and struggling growing up, single parent. And then when he got into the league, he had success, was part of the bad boy Pistons teams, winning a championship before he got to Chicago in 95, had a pit stop in San Antonio before they were good. It just, Dennis Rodman has this stigma about him. And honestly, I might be in the minority here, but I think that he'll come out of this documentary looking better in the public eye than people thought about him coming into watching The Last Dance. Just the uncut footage of showing him, wanting to be there and work, and then showing that he is a human being. When Pippen was down, Michael and him had a talk, and he was straight as an arrow, according to Michael Jordan. He was on the straight and narrow, and then Scottie came back, and he went full Rodman. I opened the show with that line about Vegas. That was my favorite part, I think, of the 4 so far, is him asking Phil for a 48-hour furlough in Vegas. Ended up being there like 5 days. And it's all because he didn't feel needed because Scottie was back. I mean,
the Vegas thing was amazing, especially because Michael is immediately like, he's not coming back. And he has to go get him. That was my favorite part, that he has to go get Dennis to come over. Although there was my favorite line of the whole show was when Phil tells him, he's like, you got to get Zen. You got to get your mind in here. And Jordan's in the huddle and goes, Phil, I mean, his body is here. Isn't that enough, man? That one got me. And then when they do I love that they do what's called, kind of not politically correct here, I don't think, but the Indian run. And they're running around, and basically Jordan wants to make it so no one has to run. So he tries to get the other guys, Jed Buechler and Steve Kerr, to slow down. And Rodman just takes off and is like lapping everyone around the field after being hung over that morning. So, I mean, yeah, he's a legend. I mean, what was your favorite of the Rodman stuff that they talked about in this? Was there like one favorite anecdote? Was it Vegas?
Yeah, it was Vegas for me. And the fact that he dated Carmen Electra, I had no idea. They ended up getting married after that season. And what's funny is he was the last remaining Bull from this group that started the 98-99 season. He ends up going to the Lakers. So him and Carmen Electra got married in Vegas. He ended up calling for an annulment. But I thought it was funny how dating her kind of led him to LA to try and play. And that was while Kobe was on the team. And I think they traded for Shaq at that point. So that would have been hilarious to watch if they do a documentary on Kobe's career, just to throw a little anecdote about Rodman in there, even though I think he played like 23 games with the Lakers. But what I take away from that is that Dennis Rodman started load management. I mean, I can't take credit for saying this because I saw Donovan Mitchell tweet it out, but when I saw that, it resonated with me. And I'm like, yo, he started that. Like, if a player tried to take a furlough in today's NBA, like, Kawhi Leonard said to Doc Rivers, like, hey, man, I'm going to go to Joshua Tree for a couple of days. Like, do you mind? Doc's going to be like, are you out of your mind?
Yeah.
You know, and I said this last week too, Ben. It's a player-driven league, and that still wouldn't fly. There'd be fines up the wazoo, but I think because, you know, they were going for a three-peat, they knew this was it. They just let Dennis Rodman be Dennis Rodman, knowing that,
Well,
you know,
but
he helped.
let's focus on Phil Jackson, because Phil Jackson is the guy who did this. And I feel like part of the Dennis Rodman thing that got kind of glossed over here, and I thought the guy who looked the best out of this, you mentioned guys who are going to look better at the end. I thought it's Phil Jackson, because across the board, you hear everyone there. And it's funny because Doug Collins is very well liked by Michael Jordan. And it comes across very clearly. Obviously, Collins coaches him in Washington again at the end of his career. And Jordan clearly loves Doug Collins. But even Jordan is very complimentary of Phil. And everyone on the team, they interview Kerr, they interview Rodman, they interview Pippen, they interview Jordan. No one has anything bad to say about the guy. And even Jerry Krause was really quite complimentary about Jackson, despite the fact that he basically ran him out of town at the end and wouldn't offer him a contract. Everyone was complimentary. You know, you could tell that Collins was a little bit defensive at points in the interview, but you can tell just how much respect everyone had for Phil. And then you see this and you realize, wow. I mean, Phil had a lot to juggle. Phil Jackson did a great job juggling these guys. And I think part of the Rodman thing was that he knew just how to manage Dennis Rodman to where he would get the best out of him when it mattered the most and kind of let him blow off steam when he needed to. I mean, do you feel like Phil Jackson also deserves some credit in the way that Dennis Rodman ultimately kind of comes out of this?
I'm just waiting for next season for Kyrie Irving to ask whoever the new Nets head coach is for a sabbatical, and he's going to try and do the same thing, and then the Nets are going to win the championship. But no, that's an interesting point you bring up. You know, I'm kind of annoyed that the Doug Collins feature was even a part of it, because going into this documentary, you're thinking, it's The Last Dance. It's a documentary on one season, and I think in 4 episodes, we've seen footage from every single season of Jordan's career, and that's kind of bothering me. As much as I love the content and the individual features, you know, Jordan, Pippen, Rodman, and Phil, at least in these first 4 episodes, still hoping for a Tony Kukoc close-up, because that was my guy in the 90s. But it just feels a little dragged out for me. And I've been thinking about it in the last 2 days since I've watched it. And when you started talking about Doug Collins, it made a little more sense as to why that part made the documentary, because it showed Jordan's growth. You know, Doug had an offense tailor-made to Michael Jordan. They weren't winning. You know, they were losing in the playoffs every year. So when Phil came on and they implemented the triangle, and Scotty morphed into an all-star, and they had all these support guys, and they turned into that dominant title contender, it showed Jordan not necessarily had to take a back seat, but he had to learn to share, because if he didn't and there was no triangle, Jordan would not have won 6 championships. So I thought that part was cool. But don't you think this is a little dragged out by the folks at ESPN? I mean, it just seems like a money grab. I know we have nothing to do and everyone's in quarantine, but man, like, it is so dragged out to the point where it frustrates me.
Flo said the same thing to me, that she didn't like it either. She felt it was kind of disjointed. It jumped all over.
It does.
For me, I love it. I mean, I am the worst person to ask. This is what I remember. So I was too young for the first three-peat, but I remember these. Like, this has gotten to the point where I can actually remember little snippets of some of these games. And I remember watching some of the Utah Jazz games in the finals and stuff like that. And so for me, this is awesome. I love this. So I am the worst person to ask, because I love the history. I love seeing the stuff. I love seeing the growth of Michael Jordan. I love seeing the first title against the Lakers.
See, I
just
don't.
all that stuff. I love it.
Then don't call it The Last Dance. Call it, you know, Jordan, like a documentary on his career. Because I do think it was cool to bring the Pistons thing back to light in '91. You know, with Isaiah Thomas and all those guys walking off the floor and showing no sportsmanship, and then Magic Johnson was over the top, complimentary, knowing his time was up, kind of passed the torch to Michael. I thought that was cool. It's not the right platform.
Right.
You want to
not
do
the
an
Last
NBA
Dance
films thing on the '90s and Jordan's title run? Fine. I want to